Work in an office environment for long enough and you'll become unfortunately familiar with these type of laptops, the Dell Latitude series. And while you might have a negative interpretation from bad past experiences, I would argue that the Dell Latitude series are some of the best laptops, in particular for those who want to work from home. Let's talk about it. This is an OISO and this is the Dell Latitude overview. Dell's Latitude line is a go-to for many businesses looking to supply laptops to their employees. The other big name is typically Lenovo's ThinkPad line, which seems to be more synonymous with business use, but in my experience, I actually prefer the experience of using Dell Latitudes, whereas I prefer the design of the ThinkPad. But maybe we'll cover ThinkPads later on. Today, we're just focusing on these laptops and that one running Cinebench up there. The Latitude line is pretty diverse in that you have just as many different models as you do XPSs and Inspirons, but they all have some consistency in design and use cases. Now, I've been using Latitudes for something like 10 years now, and I love the experience of using them, but I understand why many people don't. Often people have negative associations with the experience of using a Latitude because that is their work laptop. And their work laptop means that they are often doing long Excel, PowerPoint, or Office hours running on that work laptop. And it's often slow, loud, bulky, and hot. But I would argue that a lot of those actually come from enterprise software, security software meant to keep you safe, rather than the actual laptops themselves. We'll get to the performance section and I'll talk about what the experience of using these in a more consumer experience are. But for the most part, just know that these aren't always hot with the fan running on full blast, even though that one in the back is doing just that. The designs are usually pretty bulky though. More recently, they started switching to this gray plastic, which is more similar to Inspiron devices, but more typically you'll see black laptops like this for Latitudes. If you're going higher end, you might get something like this with a carbon fiber top panel, similar to the way that you can get carbon fiber on XPS models. But really, even this feels more like a plastic machine. Most of the frame is plastic. So it doesn't feel quite as high end as, for example, a Surface laptop or a MacBook would. In recent years, there has been a lot of shrinking of the bezels of Latitudes, which is good news considering in the past the bezels were massive. So the footprint is not always too large considering how much screen real estate that you use. A common benefit to the bulkier designs is ports, which Latitudes seem to have an abundance of compared to their more typical consumer brethren. Now, Latitudes have been kind of going weak on ports in recent years. I've seen fewer and fewer Ethernet ports and fewer USB-A ports, but that means that they're often being replaced with Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 ports, which is a good move. I just wish they always had USB-A ports on both sides of the device, unlike this one. In order to fully understand the Latitude line and make a good purchasing decision, you need to understand the 4 digits of each model. This, for example, is the 7420. The first digit denotes the tier that it's in, 7 being the higher tier, 5 being mid-tier, 3 being oh god, and the 9 being the most premium tier that more recently got introduced. I haven't tried a 9 yet, but I'm really hoping to do so soon. The second number, the 4 in this case, denotes the screen size, 4 being 14 inches. This, for example, is a 5520, meaning that there is a 15-inch screen. There are a lot of Latitudes that have 13-inch screens, so those would have a 3. The third digit denotes what generation it's in, so each year that number increments 1. The 20 means that is now the second or third generation of the more recent iteration of Latitudes. They more recently overrode the numbers and rolled over into the next generation after maybe 10 years of sticking with the old Latitude line. So I, for example, had a 5470, but that was an E5470 from 5 or 6 years ago. Now, the 7420, the 20 line is now being replaced with the 30 line, which is the most recent as far as I know. If you stay within the 0 series or newer, chances are you're going to get a relatively modern laptop with a quad-core processor or better. The 5400 that I have here is an i7 8th generation. It's the 8665, which is perfectly new enough for most people. Now, obviously, if you want something a little bit newer, the 10th, 11th, or 12th generation chips, you'll have to opt for the 10 or the 20 series, or even the 30 series. Finally, the last digit is usually just a 0, but sometimes denotes whether the Latitude is a unique model from other Latitudes. So for example, in the back here I have the 5410, and this one right here is the 5411. This one notably has a higher wattage processor rather than the mobile series chips that are in these laptops. So sometimes Dell changes that number, but for the most part, you'll see zeros. So in terms of design, why go with a bulky and thick Latitude over a more thin and light consumer laptop? Well, one benefit is the ports. The second benefit is the fact that most Latitudes, most of the ones that I've had so far, do have upgradable storage and sometimes upgradable RAM as well. This, for example, has something like 10 screws that you can take off the back. You can pop off the back panel and easily upgrade both the RAM and the storage by just buying upgraded storage on Amazon. That is awesome. It's an awesome feature that most laptops should have, but only more recently are we starting to see it in more consumer laptops like the Surface line. That's frustrating considering they do usually have the internal space to build more heat pipes and more fans, but you'll only really typically see those in the larger and more expensive models. As I mentioned, Latitudes come in a lot of different form factors. This one, for example, has a touchscreen and a 360-degree hinge, which means you can use it as a tablet. Obviously, it's going to be thicker than most tablets, but it is a nice opportunity, for example, if you want to set it up on an airplane tray table and watch movies. Now, I'd say that typically my go-to is the 4 series, or the 7420 or the 5420, because those have the right in-between of size, the extra screen real estate of 14 inches, and still being relatively portable and easy to slip into bags. Devices like this, the 5520 over here, do have the additional benefit of a 15-inch screen, but unfortunately this is very, very large, and I don't think it's really worth the extra screen real estate. It does also have a full number pad on the keyboard, so if you are an accountant or if you really need the numbers, for example, I do benefit from it sometimes. It's nice to have those as an additional option, but I typically would go for a smaller device along the lines of the 74 or 5420. In terms of performance, usually the specs you see is the performance you get. Now, obviously, as I mentioned, the heat dissipation on some of these devices isn't always the best, so sometimes the performance will be bottlenecked by the heat. But for the most part, some of these can come with some very, very high-end specs and more RAM than most consumer laptops can get. In most cases, the displays on business laptops are kind of the weak point. There's not going to be the same sort of high-end, glossy, high-resolution panels that you get in most consumer laptops nowadays, like, for example, the MacBook line, the Surface line, or the XPS line, but that's usually by design. The benefit of having 1080p panels is typically the battery life is substantially better. And the benefit of not having a super glossy panel means that you can actually see these in daylight without seeing a lot of reflections. Not all the panels are completely matte, so for example, those that have touchscreens like this might have the same sort of glossy glass finish that you'd find on most consumer devices. But for the most part, you'll see matte finishes, and I actually prefer that in most cases unless I'm specifically trying to use it with a touchscreen. Like many consumer devices, a lot of these laptops have built-in Windows Hello in facial recognition or built into the fingerprint reader power button, which is nice to have. On Dell's Latitude website, you actually can upgrade to a fingerprint reader for very, very cheap. So if you're planning on speccing one of these new, I highly recommend using that as an option. But up until this point, I probably haven't made a good enough argument for why you should opt for these devices over a more traditional consumer device. And the biggest reason is reliability, warranty, and pricing. Now, reliability is kind of mixed. Obviously, all systems have a tendency to degrade over time, and all systems have bugs. So I've seen many different issues with Latitude devices over the years, but probably just as many on a per unit basis as I have seen in consumer devices. The good news is most Latitude devices come with a longer-term warranty. So higher-end business-style warranties for business-style laptops have a tendency to be a lot more lenient, a lot more supportive than a typical one-year consumer warranty. Now, most warranties are more expensive, but that gets us to the last point of price. Now, if you're buying these devices new, usually they'll carry a pretty substantial premium over consumer devices, and that comes with the more business experience they expect to be for enterprise. And most small businesses and large businesses have the ability to pay more for more consistent, dependable devices. But if you're buying secondhand or refurbished, these devices often come at a substantial discount to their consumer parallels. So for example, these devices would probably be priced more similarly to a Dell Inspiron line rather than a Dell XPS line, even though their starting price is more similar to that of the Dell XPS. And the reason is because a lot of these devices are bought in bulk. They might buy 50, 100, or 200 units at a time, meant for many different employees. And then when businesses either refresh to a new model, employees leave the company, or worst case scenario, the businesses go under, then you have a large amount of laptops entering the market at a substantial discount to MSRP. So if you buy these on sites like eBay, you can find often really, really deep discounts from MSRP with the original warranty still attached. So for example, you might still get 2, 3, or even 4 years of the original 4 or 5 year warranty that the business purchased the laptop with, which is pretty substantial and in most cases would be hundreds of dollars of value. Now, Dell has been a little bit shaky in the past with different people on whether they will actually fulfill and honor a warranty purchased by another person or a business. In some cases I've seen in forum posts, people have had worse luck than me, but I have fulfilled many different warranty requests, probably 20 or 30, probably more than that over the years with Dell Latitudes, and had a lot of success with the warranties, despite them being under the name of another individual or a business. There is technically a warranty transfer process that you can undertake in order to get in your name, but I've found even not doing that, I have a tendency to still get warranty support. And it's a lot better than having to pay $200 or $300 for a 2-year warranty with a consumer laptop. This warranty support is usually very, very premium in that they will send a technician to your location or to your office or wherever you want them to be in order to fix maybe a battery or a screen issue, which is a really incredible experience for just the average consumer. The other thing I typically really love about Dell Latitude devices that I don't get on other devices is the keyboard experience. Now, honestly, some consumer keyboards have gotten better over time, but Dell Latitudes are typically substantially better because they have more travel and a larger footprint. Now, I've been using the 5400 for a couple of years and I love this keyboard, but unfortunately Dell more recently switched to a more shallow experience with the 5410 and 5420 line. I don't know exactly why it's happening, but I'm hoping that they either go back or they offer a model for those of us who still want a lot of travel in the keyboard. The trackpad is a worse experience depending on the model you have. These models, for example, the mid-range models in the 5 series typically have the older style trackpad that doesn't actually depress with dedicated left and right buttons on the bottom left. Some also have the track point, similar to Lenovo ThinkPad devices, with dedicated keys for that. I don't really mind this too much, but I could understand why some people might get sick of it because they have to have multiple fingers on the trackpad at once rather than just being able to click with a single pointer finger. That's why there is the option in higher end models like here, the 7410, that does allow you to actually click like a normal trackpad, but this doesn't have a track point and doesn't have the mouse buttons on the bottom. In most cases, even when there is the more traditional trackpad like this, the experience is probably worse than most comparable consumer laptops in terms of consistency, smoothness, and experience. If you are working from home, the Fact that your laptop is super thin and made of metal and is super pretty shouldn't make an impact on your work experience. Maybe it makes you happier, in which case you should totally go with that MacBook or that Surface. But instead, if all you need is a very, very dependable, reliable, and powerful device that can do everything you need, but at a reasonable price point, the Dell Latitude series is actually very, very impressive for that. And it's why that I always have at least one kicking around. Right now, I have more than one. If I had to pick, then I'd say, yes, I do love this whole 360 degrees, more premium, thin design of the 7400 series, 7410 in this case. But in most cases, I actually prefer the keyboard on the 5400. The 5400, despite its age, is still performing very, very well for me. And in terms of Excel or daily use, this is still a go-to for me. You could probably find the Latitude 5400 with an i7 8th generation processor, 16 gigs of RAM, and either 256 or 512 gigs of storage on eBay for around 400 or 500 bucks, with a several years of warranty left. That's an incredible price point for what is a still very, very competent device. Yes, I would love to see a more modern processor like a 12th gen i7, and that probably will offer substantially more performance if you're choosing to go and edit videos on your machine, for example. But for the average person, if you're doing office work, then this is an incredibly capable device that will last you several years into the future and be supported by Dell. If, for whatever reason, you need more power, then thankfully you can upgrade it, which is such a great feature, and I'd love to see it in many other laptops in the future. I don't know if we're going to see upgradable RAM on consumer devices anytime soon, most consumer devices, but at least we have upgradable storage for now. Thank you for watching NYSO. Frankly, I could talk for hours about the experience of using Latitude products, but I'd love to see your thoughts. Would you ever consider buying a Latitude for yourself? What Latitude would you be interested in? Do you want something that's still more consumer-like, thin, light, and gives like a 2-in-1 experience? Or are you okay with that whole bulky, give me everything I need and I don't care about the footprint sort of thing, like the Latitude 5520 I have here? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you for watching. I hope you like this. If you did, be sure to get subscribed, like, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.